How far do we have to go to lunch? How far is it?
Oh, it's about 8 miles, 6 to 8 miles.
I picked up a map.
Of what?
Of Italy. And I thought maybe you could point out on here.
Calabrese. Yeah, here's where, this is Calabria here. This is where Dad was born in Reggio, and Mama was born in Cosenza, which is right next door. He was born in 1875, and she was born in 1876, and they were married about 1898 or 99. John was born in 1900. Dad came over about the time John was born, and then Mama came over in 1904.
Uh-huh.
Over on Rutland,
Here's where it is.
down the toe of the boot.
Yeah, right. And here's Sicily
Right.
and the Straits of Messina there. And each one of these provinces are like counties out in California. They each have their own dialect. They all speak basically Italian, but they have a different, like,
Right.
you white people come into Arkansas and you don't understand what we're talking about.
So do we have any other relatives that you know of that are still over there?
Oh, yes. My dad had, I don't know if he had any sisters. I never heard of any sisters, but he had several brothers. And some of the brothers came over here. Uncle Tom, his brother was just older, and Dad was the youngest one of the family and the first one to die. Uncle Pete lived in New York and in Glasgow, and they owned a brickyard. And that's where Dad and his brothers worked, in that brickyard. And then later on, Dad went to Pennsylvania while in the 4 years that he was here by himself. Mama was still over in Italy. Well, he went to work in mines in Pennsylvania. And they worked underground, 3 people to a group. And I guess one of them went in and he drilled holes and then put the blasting caps in there. And one night they were in there and something went wrong, and a big rock of coal came up in the roof and it fell on the guy that was in charge of the blasting. It wasn't my father or uncle, it was the other guy. And it killed him. And my uncle the rock broke his leg that came down, but it killed the blaster. And he never went in it. Dad and uncle never went in back in the coal mine. So when Mother came over, they met her on Ellis Island. And
1904.
yeah, in 1904, and they stayed there in New York with Uncle Pete until they got money enough together, and then they worked their way across the country, and they went out to Lathrop, California.
My home is in,
Dad went to work for what was then the
actually
Western
live in
Pacific
Woodbridge, which
Railroad
is close to
at the
Lodi.
Roundhouse there in
Lodi,
Lathrop,
Stockton.
and he worked as a Gandy
Yes, yeah.
dancer.
Lodi's about 13 miles.
Uh-huh.
And
down to-
the
and
Gandy
Woodbridge
dancers are the
right
people
next
that
to
put
Lodi.
those ties in under the railroad tracks. That's what they called them, Gandy, and they pounded them with a rod, with a gravel underneath them.
Californian.
And then
Born.
when
Yeah.
your mother was born in 1917 and the house burnt down in July of 1917, why they moved to Stockton, and that was when we moved to the house on Weber Avenue.
The house in Lathrop burnt down?
Yeah. I was 5 years old, and I can remember Mama holding your mother in her arms, and we were out there in the street watching the house burn. It was in the summertime, and we were down in the basement having dinner. And I can vaguely remember as we went out that the stove door was open, and there was some wood hanging out of the stove, And the wood fell down on the wood floor and set the kitchen on fire. And Ange, who was about maybe 10 years old or so at the time, she went and started to go out and get a pitcher of water, and she said, "Hey, the house is on fire." And so they took us out of the kitchen and heard us out on the street, and we watched the house burn down to ashes.
Sounds like me with my little sister. I did the same
We're
thing
we're
with my
picking
little
you
sister.
up very clearly on this.
So anyway, I've been scared to death of fires ever since. I was 5 years old, and I can remember that. And then since that time, I've been involved in 3 fires. When I was in property management there in Stockton and Sacramento, I was involved in 3 fires that burned houses down. Some of our property, property that I managed, that we managed. So I've been scared to death of fires ever since.
My daddy
So
into
anyway,
the operation.
Do you don't remember the address in
whatever
Winthrop,
he
do you?
was
In Lathrop?
down or
Yeah.
no. They didn't have addresses like you have nowadays.
At that time, whatever it was, we was.
And then they moved in Stockton to where?
To 1904
I did
East Weber
driving, and
Avenue.
he'd do
That's the
the
house
name of the
that Tony
blouse
was in when he
and
died.
everything that he was working
And
for.
Eleanor sold it to.
Right across from the cannery?
Yeah,
That was A Street, wasn't it?
A and Weber.
Big.
Weber Avenue went down along the railroad track.
Oh, okay.
1904 Weber, that's what the address I remember.
Yeah, I was gonna say, ask your mother.
Yeah.
My mama died when I was
Oh,
5. I'd say, Daddy.
And then,
My mama. Oh, Daddy.
the house where Tony was born, during that time, they moved to Lathrop and back up to Stockton. We were in Stockton when Tony was born in 1915. And the house that he was born in was on Lafayette, and,
I think if he'd go marry a woman, could cook good, I wouldn't have to be cooking.
you know, Strictly Park is. Lafayette Street runs into it.
My father was wonderful.
Well, it was about a block and a half, or 2 blocks east of Strictly Park on Lafayette Street. That's the house he was born in. I was born in Lathrop. Ange was born there in Lathrop in 1906. Fanny was born in September of 1907.
Back over my years.
Sam was born in Lathrop in November of 1910. I was born in Lathrop in September of 1912. Tony was born in Stockton in 1915. Then we went back to Lathrop because Dad went to work for the railroad company again, and your mother was born there in Lathrop in January of 1917. And Mary was born in Stockton after the house burned down. We were there. She was born there on Weber Avenue in February 20, 1920.
Aunt Mary?
Yeah,
And she was the last.
she was the last one, yeah. And they're all gone now except me.
So I had the affidavit for Mom's birth. Just a second, I want to get a picture here.
Oh.
And there's some names on it. It looked like Aunt Ange was the midwife,
Yeah, no, she was the witness.
and then somebody with an M. Spino was a witness. Of course, that was in 1975, so.
Yeah, this was. I attended Mrs. DeCicco as midwife at the birth of her daughter Helen DeCicco. Helen DeCicco's father was Joseph. Yeah. This must have been.
It's not even 10 o'clock yet. Seemed to me like it ought to be later.
Ange was as a witness, you know,
Oh.
because during World War II, I never had a birth certificate. So I had to get, because of the work I was doing, I had to have a special clearance from the FBI, and she went and the church burned down where we'd all been baptized, and there was no records anywhere of any kind. And this Mrs. Spino, you probably don't know it, but Spino was my dad's mother's maiden name. And back in Italy, back in those days, kids sometimes took their mother's maiden name instead of their father's.
Really? This one has Helen Spino on it. And then in some documents, it's,
Well, this was your mother.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
But why the Spino? That's why?
That was my grandmother's maiden name. And my dad, not my dad as much as a couple of his brothers took that name. And if you go to Lathrop, you'll find out that the mail, or the postmaster in Lathrop was Mike Spino. He was my cousin.
Oh.
And this must be his mother that was Mrs. Spino, that was the under here where Mrs. Angelina DeCicco, that must have been my sister, wrote that. And the witness was Mrs. Spino. must have been my aunt.
Oh, interesting.
So
That clears it up a bit.
we never, after I got old enough to know the difference, I never used the name Spino.
Did your father ever use the name Spino, or was he always DeCicco?
Oh, he always used the name DeCicco. The people called him Tony Spino, but that wasn't his name.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh.
Your dad's name was Joseph, right?
Joseph DeCicco. Yeah,
And they call him Tony Spino.
yeah. All Italians were Tony. Yeah, for real.
Huh.
Like Mexicans and Filipinos were, hey Joe.
Of course they.
Yeah.
All Mexicans were Joe. And Filipinos were all Joe. Because they talked, and I don't know if you know it or not, but over in the Philippine Islands, they talk, they have their natural language, which is Tagalog. And then they have well, you ought to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the national language is Spanish. Everybody speaks Spanish, regardless of what nationality they are over there. That's the way it was when I was a kid. They brought the Filipinos over in boatloads, because they worked out in the asparagus fields. The white people wouldn't do that kind of work. Like now with the Mexicans, they tell us that Tyson here imports wetbacks by the boatload. Tyson's the biggest meat producer in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and they're based here in Arkansas. And so they go down there and they bring these wetbacks up here, and every once in a while the immigration department gets a big head on, and they go out and they round these guys up by the boatload, and they take them down there and they dump them off on this side of the border, and they cross the border and they turn around and come back up through here.
Yeah. Now, how many brothers did you say your father had?
He must have had 5 or 6.
Uh-huh.
Over in Italy, back in those days, every son had to serve in the military. Like number 1 and number 2 was excused. He was left at home to take care of number 3. 1, 3, 5, 7. We had to go to serve. And Dad was the youngest of the one. He was the tallest one. He was the only one that was 6 feet tall. And
What did he die from?
Dad, when he was in the military over in Italy, they were out on maneuvers and they got snowed in during the winter. They got snowed in, they couldn't get out. So the commander decided to send something to the headquarters down in Cosenza. And so he asked for volunteers. Dad was the tallest one in the bunch, because Italian people back in those days were 5 feet tall, They were Mr. 5 by 5. And Dad was 6 feet tall. And they fixed him a briefcase and handcuffed it to his wrist. And he walked through the snow all that way. And when he got to Cosenza, where they took the thing off and gave him some free time, And then later on, there was a swelling come out on that wrist, like a boil type thing. And it was there the rest of his life. And it got up and it got so big that he had to go have it lanced. And in 1925 or 6, I took him to the doctor at St. Joseph's Hospital in Stockton, because this thing had got that big, and they'd operated on it, and they'd scraped the bone and everything, and the thing healed up, and then it started forming this pus. So I took him to Dr. Zinkin in Stockton. And Dad and I were there, and I was getting ready to get on the streetcar and go home. And Zinkin come in, and he said, Frank, we're going to have to take your dad's arm off. He said, this has got splitting all up here. And Dad didn't understand English too well, so I interpreted for him. I said, Dad, in Italian, I said, Dad, they're going to have to take your arm off. And he asked me 2 or 3 times, And he said, well, I was born with 2 arms and I'll die with 2 arms. He said, they're not going to take my arm off. And he did die with the arm. But it was pneumonia that actually killed him. But I have an idea that this was one of the doctors, septicemia, blood poisoning. And he developed a pneumonia, and that's what kills all us old folks. Actually, you know, most of the 99% of the time is pneumonia, and so that's what killed him.
Oh. You've had a pneumonia shot though, right?
Yeah, I've been getting flu shots ever since I've been here in Arkansas, and they gave us the booster pneumonia shot this year. We've been lucky this year. We haven't come down with any severe colds or anything, or the flu. But a lot of the people at the inn where we go to, matter of fact, there's 10 people that sit at one table all the time. Pete and I've been going there since 1992, and always sit at that same table, and we've become fast friends. And every one of them, out of the 10, she and I are the only ones that are not on Medicaid or whatever you call it. And out in California, I think they call it Medi-Cal, don't they?
Yeah.
Oh, here they call it Medicaid. And we're the only 2 out of that 10 that are not on that. And all of them at one time or another in the past month or so have been off with this damn flu thing or whatever it is going around. But Pete and I haven't been.
Oh, that's good.
So, and we pray that we don't get it.
So, as far as the siblings, your brothers and
Yeah.
sisters.
John died of a heart attack.
Uh-huh.
Ange died of diabetes. Fanny died of a stroke a year after she had the stroke. Sam died of heart disease. But Sam was the only one that developed cancer. We were there when they did the surgery on him, and it was at the time Ronald Reagan had the cancer, you know, about. And the doctor come in, he had a radiator hose, you know, and he come in and he said, it was about 2 inches in diameter, about 18 inches long. He says, this is what you had. He said, you had the same cancer the president's got. And he it was up for Sam. They took 18 inches of Sam's bowel out, and they put this tube in there, and it worked fine for several years. But he had 2 heart surgeries. I think he was the only one that had bypass operations. And I'm still here. Tony dropped dead of a heart attack at 59. He died. He was the youngest member of the family to die. And then your mother died of, I was told it was a liver problem. What did you call it?
Polycystic kidneys.
Polycystic? Well, today when we go to lunch, I'll introduce you to Brenda. Her daddy's having some trouble with his lungs, and I wonder if it could be the same thing. He said that his lungs are getting hard.
Yeah, that's different.
It doesn't sound like the same.
Yeah. The polycystic kidneys are just kidneys that
There's
develop
cysts all over
inside them.
There's cysts. You know what a cyst is?
Yeah.
Cysts all over the kidneys
Well,
and the liver.
When Helen went to, what was that name of that butcher shop out there on
Man, news.
Dameron?
Bad News?
Oh,
I was in the hospital with liver problems, and I told my doctor, and he wrote to the guy, the bastard that operated on your mother, and he wouldn't send his records down there, wouldn't send her records to my doctor.
They usually have to discover what happens with polycystic.
Anyway, they opened me up and they said there's nothing that matches what you tell me. Because
Here.
Helen or Les told me that they found cysts or something like that on her liver.
Well, that's
Yeah,
part
it
of
started
it.
out.
That's part of it. But
So I
polycystic.
told my doctor, and they opened me up because they said, if this is that way, and because one of my doctors thought that I had cancer of the pancreas. Now this was in 1964, 5? Was that when your mother had that?
No, she had that operation in 57.
Okay, well, anyway, I told them, and they kept putting me off. I kept having this horrible pain in my right side. And finally, my doctor sent me to a diagnostic specialist. And he said, Frank's got cancer of the pancreas. This specialist did. And my doctor came in and he said, you know, we spent the money to get him here. We better go ahead and open you up and take a look. So he opened me up, and I had a, let me think now, post-hepatic stricture. And they took and transplanted my bile duct and stuff, and then you may remember in Bakersfield, I was in the hospital for a month with raging fever and this pus and stuff boiling out of my side all the time.
Hmm.
And they, of course, they buried me and everything else all that time because I was in real bad shape. That was in 1964 or 5 when they operated on me finally. And,
You managed to survive.
yeah.
I've sure been lucky. I've
But,
never had any surgeries.
Oh, I've had, in 1949, Millie came home from work one night. She was working swing shift in the drugstore, and she found me passed out on the bathroom floor vomiting blood. I had 5 operations that year, and my belly looks like a checkerboard. And she called the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, and she told me later, she said, when I watched them put you in the ambulance, she said, I was sure I'd never see you alive. And because I'd lost all that blood. And she said that my face was gray like that TV set over there. And they took me, and when I came to, they had blood going in each one of my ankles and each one of my arms. And I got, in my lifetime, I've had 57 pints of blood given to me.
Wow.
So I don't know whether I'm white, black, or Filipino, or
So
what.
you're not full-blooded Italian anymore.
Not anymore. But anyway, I was in the hospital at Torrance, in the Torrance General, which used to be a military hospital. That was used during World War II, and it was a great big wooden ramshackle place, you know. And so that's where I woke up, and I was in that place. And I was in there for a total of, I went in on the 15th of October, 1949, and they operated on me in the first part of November, and they removed 90% of my stomach. They did that, what they're doing now, you know, with that bypass operation, they did that to me, only it was a lot more severe. And there was only one doctor on the West Coast that was doing them, and he was based in Long Beach. And they get their patients, they'd send them to Torrance General Hospital, and he'd come there and do the job. One of the staff surgeons would open you up and close you, and the other guy, he'd come in and he'd do the inside work, and he'd go on, the specialist.